If you go out and are starting a new yard and you go out and buy a shit ton of equipment and you have no customers lined up and you can't afford to pay those payments, you are going to be in trouble. When things are good, it's easy to get lazy when it comes to spending.
Let's say my payroll is $5,000 a month, right? On a normal month where there's 4 payrolls, well, now there's one extra. It's not going to be $5,000 anymore.
It's not going to impact you immediately. It's going to impact you 3, 4, 5 months down the road. Cash flow. Let's talk about something every business needs and wants and has to have. They have to have this thing called cash flow. Even nonprofits have to have it, right? Money in and money out. That's basically the redneck fundamentals of cash flow.
Well, what is cash flow?
It's money in and money out. I just said that.
I know, but let's get into it just a little bit further than that. What do you say? So don't let you be confused with profit. So it took us a little bit, but we finally got it figured out. But profit, cash flow. If you're looking at a P&L and you see your net profit at the end of the month, that is not your cash flow. Don't not let yourself get confused. Cash flow is the money in. Profit is what you made, but that does not mean that you collected that money.
Exactly. Too many people get caught up on all these financials. They're like, well, I made $1.5 million, or I made $100,000 last month, or I made $10,000 last week. Well, how much of that did you collect?
That's the key.
Right?
That's the key.
You can bill out whatever you want, but if you don't collect it, it doesn't matter.
No, you didn't make it.
You're still broke.
You're still broke. Yep, exactly.
So today we're going to talk about cash flow, why it's important, how to calculate it, right? Not in-depth calculation, but just general calculations and things that we look at, and why it's important, right? Cash flow is probably your most important thing in the business besides a product or service you're offering.
Yeah, and the first thing that comes to mind is operating cash flow, because I'm living this day in and day out, is you have to have operating cash flow to pay your expenses. Every business has expenses. So you have to make sure that you have enough money coming in and then going out to pay all your expenses, plus whatever is left over that can go into your business and or your pocket. Ideally, everybody wants to put money in their pocket.
You can have positive net income and negative cash flow.
Absolutely.
Happens all the time. People don't pay attention to their accounts receivable. They extend terms too out. They're borrowing money to provide services, and it's been ate up 1,000 different ways.
Yep. And your operating cash flow is just your money that is created from the operations of your business. Simple as that. That's your operating cash flow.
Yep. And you can do so many things to help your cash flow out by renegotiating your payment terms to your vendors.
Increasing your rates on your equipment. As long as you're collecting your AR correctly, if your price goes up, you're still collecting your AR, the amount of cash flow is going to go up with that.
Yeah, and we look at cash flow from day to day to weekly to monthly to quarterly to yearly. There's a lot of ways you can look at cash flow.
Yep.
So, but long story short, cash flow is key to your business. If you're not paying attention to your cash flow, we always say this on our podcast, have your numbers in order. Make sure they're correct. Make sure your chart of accounts and your numbers going into those chart of accounts in those sectors are where they need to be, right?
Exactly.
That will allow you to make adjustments to make a positive cash flow impact, right? So let's talk about types of cash flow. You got operating cash flow,
which we just talked about.
You got investment cash flow, and that could be buying land, buying sites, buying equipment, buying whatever. You know, if you buy this, how much money is it going to throw off?
Well, let's give them a good example. If you like you're in the multifamily homes, right? So there's lots of ways that you're making money in multifamily homes, like appreciation, right? But at the end of the day, sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't. But if you buy it right and you've got it on the terms and you're paying your interest and everything else, and it could produce cash flow after that individual pays that payment to you, and your payment is less than the amount of the payment to the bank or whoever is holding the money.
And we refer to that in the real estate world as NOI, net operating income. If you don't know what that is, look it up. There's thousands of videos on that. I'm not going to go in depth today, but net operating income in real estate, right? There's that can associate that with not just real estate, can do service companies, product sales, whatever, right? You have to have cash flow to pay payments, right? If I go buy an apartment complex or I go buy a dozer, right? And I go have tenants in there and I bill out and the tenants never pay me, I cannot pay the bank. I cannot pay myself back, right? So therefore, you have a net negative cash flow. You might have a net positive billing rate, right? Income, but you have a net negative cash flow. So another one is your financing cash flow, right? That could be a humongous impact to your bottom line. If you are operating a business with zero debt, you're not paying the bank. You're automatically 7-8% on your debt that you would have incurred, right? That's why it's so imperative to minimize debt, because debt costs money.
Yep.
You know, you hear about private equity and all this stuff that like to leverage businesses up, but that's great if everything's working.
And right now, financing debt is expensive.
It's expensive. That's why you and I focus a lot of our time, instead of paying ourselves a lot of money, we focus our time about paying down debt, because cash is king and it's costly. It costs money to borrow money, right? It's how banks make money.
That's right.
So, you know, let's go into some depth on some of these things, you know.
What are the cash flow problems, right? We already talked about one of them is a lot of times cash flow, it becomes a problem when you're not collecting the money that you're owed. Sometimes you go out, we have on our financial package, it goes out 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120. And then at some point you have to pull the trigger and say, hey, we've done everything we can do. We're going to write that off.
And that's to the third one. I consider that would be in financing cash flow, because you're financing your customer at that point.
I would agree with that.
You know what I mean?
Exactly what you're doing.
So let's start with operating cash flow. What are the things that impact your operating cash flow? That's Eric's in the porta potty business and the dumpster business. If he's not optimizing routes, it's going to freaking affect your cash flow. If you're selling a widget and you're spending too much to manufacture it, too much to ship it, it's going to affect your bottom line profit unless you adjust your rates. And sometimes you cannot do that depending on what market sector you're in. So your business activities within your business that affect your operations it's ultimately going to affect your cash flow. Yeah. So let's talk about investment cash flow. And what does that mean? I always think about investment cash flow as equipment, land, buildings, people. People cost you money. People don't.
You invest in people.
I look at businesses and I look at people as investments. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The problem with a piece of equipment, when I buy it, I own it. I do not own my people. I can go put a shit ton of money in the individual by training and uniforms and laptops and all this stuff, and they can quit tomorrow.
Yep.
There's nothing you can do.
And that's why culture is important.
And 100%.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic. We have some of those on there, developing a good corporate culture and things that we have done, and we right and wrong, right?
So if you're wondering, go back and check out one of our old podcasts about culture.
So when you're buying a piece of equipment or a machine or whatever it may be, or implementing that person, make sure it's the right timing. Make sure you're buying the right type of asset. Make sure you're doing it the right way, because it's definitely going to impact the bottom line. People don't put enough emphasis on this. They buy equipment too early. They buy it too late. They hire people too early. They overpay them, right?
And some of that
there's 1,000 ways it's going to impact it in a negative way.
Yeah.
We're experiencing some of that right now.
I know, and entrepreneurship is hard. So don't kid yourself, right? And a lot of it, when you get to the size we are, a lot of it is we do things on projections based on financial data from previous years and looking at market sectors and what they're doing, right? And there's been some times here recently that we purchased a little too early, and now we're sitting there holding that cost, right, of 7-8% per month, and that shit adds up. So, in general, you have to be very, very cautious of what you're doing, overestimating things, budget projections, and because if you buy it wrong, the cost is expensive, and you're just ultimately, it's about cash flow, so you're ultimately just hurting your cash flow. And you hurt your cash flow too much, you're not going to have a business.
So, last one in types of cash flow, investment cash flow, right? Rate of return on your investment. How much is that money costing you? How much is that employee costing you? Are you issuing dividend stocks? You know what I mean? All those things are going to impact your cash flow in a lot of different ways. So the types of cash flow that we discussed, from operating to investing and to financing, are the three major types of sectors that we put our boxes in. Step number 3 is common cash flow problems. You just hit on that. And we can go through that. Late payments. Let people drag out your payments way late. In our industry, in the construction industry, if a job shuts down, they close out the job, they bill out the tenant or they bill out the end user all their money, and we go bill them out because we messed up our billing or we didn't stay on top of the AR. Sometimes we can't collect.
That's just a reality of any entrepreneur and any businesses. Sometimes you just can't collect.
Set systems in place. You know, if your cash flow is tight, don't give somebody 60, 90-day terms. You're setting yourself up for success. That's stupid, folks. Don't be stupid. This is why you need to watch the show, because we're going to teach you not to be stupid. We have been stupid many of times.
Yeah, and speaking of terms and financing, I'm sure we've talked about this before, but that's kind of how we started out our business. We got our net terms down to 10 days. We knew that our equipment payments weren't going to be due till 60, 90, 120. And then we understand that gap and how much money you're going to make and guaranteeing that we're going to get paid in 10 days and that our bill isn't going to come out for 60.
Exactly. So, and then giving your customer multiple options of ways to pay, ACH, direct deposit, check, cash, wire transfer. We accept them all. We try to do anything and everything we can to minimize impact of your late payments, right? We don't want to give you an excuse why you don't pay us. So be upfront with your customer, understand your finances, and don't let people drag you too far out. It will bankrupt you. I've seen it too many times. It's about happened to me multiple times. In fact, today, folks, I had to call customers that are net 140, 160 days out. That is ridiculous. That means if I go rent them something, they're paying me every 4 to 6 months. That's stupid. Do not do that. Second one, over another issue we've always encountered because we're super optimistic and we think sometimes we're better than what we are, or we have this idea of what we can do and it just doesn't go to plan. And that's overestimating sales and growth. Goes back to what you just said earlier, buying equipment too early.
It's a difficult game, right? Because, you're pounding yourself in your chest and you know what you've done the last 2 years and you're going to do the same damn thing or better this year. And then something could change and something could change in a really rapid pace. And if you make that wrong decision, you better be able to react quickly to change and maneuver, because that holding cost could be that negative, put you into that negative cash flow we've been talking about.
Let's simplify that, folks. I like the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. If you go out and are starting a new yard and you go out and buy a shit ton of equipment and you have no customers lined up and you can't afford to pay those payments, you are going to be in trouble. It's not rocket science. We buy as we go. We try to have a minimum utilization percentage in our yard. Right now, we're kind of fat. It's off season and we've made some purchases of companies. We kind of pre-bought our company or pre-bought our rental assets. It's definitely impacting our cash flow.
Yeah. And that's literally the next point I was going to make is this excessive spending. Excessive spending doesn't have to be, you go to the finest filet mignon restaurants every single day or every single lunch. It could be excessive spending. Could be you're not cutting people quick enough, knowing that your business is seasonal and you're holding an extra 4 or 5 bodies. And next thing you know, you're $5, $6, $10, $20,000 negative in cash flow that month. So overspending can be an easier one to adjust quickly. You just have to have your numbers in place.
Exactly. Excessive spending, when things are good, it's easy to get lazy when it comes to spending. You let your salesman buy a bunch of handouts that are overpriced and they don't get handed out. You join all these groups and don't show up. You go buy dinners for customers and they're only producing 1,000. You spend them $1,000 on dinner, right? When things are good, it's very, very easy to get content with your spending, right?
Yeah.
Develop habits, put systems in place, and don't get lazy. Because when you do, it's not going to impact you immediately. It's going to impact you 3, 4, 5 months down the road, right? And then it's going to take a little time to retract all those bad habits and retrain yourself on bad habits in your employees that you created, right? And I'd be the worst about it. I like nice things. So when we are making money, I'm one to go spend it sometimes. Everybody around me knows that. That's one of my bad habits. But I'm also super conservative. I've learned over the time I don't put myself in a bad situation. Most of the time, sometimes it's bad investments, right?
It happens.
Excessive spending could be, hey, my business A over here is doing good, my golden egg, and I'm going to go take that excess cash flow because I'm good. I'm doing great. I'm fucking on top of the mountain right now, and I'm going to go buy real estate. I'm going to go invest in this company. I'm going to add this vertical market. In all reality, you should be putting that money back in your company, putting it into systems, putting into things you already know that already is generating a high rate of return and high profit margin and things that are working, right? We
live it.
We lived it last year. We started all these different companies the last 2 years, and none of them, not saying they were making money, but not making
the rate of return
as the golden goose.
I know. And we look at ourselves, we look at it on paper, we're like, boom, you know what I mean? Like, what in the world am I doing? So
solutions. Let's talk about that. We talked about that just a second ago. Putting things in for invoicing, strategic payment terms. Don't let people drag you out too far. They're not a customer if you do not get paid. They are a liability. Only customers pay bills. If they do not pay their bills, they're not a customer. You might as well just burn your money, right?
Another good one is just controlling your expenses, like we have said. Control your expenses, whether that be just erroneous spending and ball caps or pins or fuel or labor, like we talked about. But controlling your expenses is a hell of a good strategy for improving your cash flow.
Yeah, and then all those are good solutions. If you maintain those and you pay attention to all those things, you minimize those things, you don't let people drag you out, and you don't overspend in certain categories, all those will help you maintain positive cash flow.
Mm-hmm. So let's on to our next place, which is forecasting and managing cash flow for growth. So number one is not everybody can forecast. So we were lucky enough, we brought a group in to project and do some projections and forecasting for us so that we know month to month, if we're up on expenses and we're down on sales, we're going to know at the end of that month, and we better make our adjustments. It's all about making those adjustments to catch up if you were off in any way. But knowing how much you need to make and knowing what your expenses are will ultimately understand what your cash flow is, as long as you're taking in your payments like you're supposed to.
100%. And for us, I just set in place for Eric and our executive team and his team is, how do you incentivize your ops, your accounting department, and your marketing department, sales department, and your president? How do you incentivize them if they don't own part of your company to watch these things? Mm-hmm. As professional as you think they are, please spend some time. It took me 4 years to do it, way too long, but spend some time in putting systems in place to incentivize your people to watch your cash flow, right? To drive more dollars to the bottom line. Because ultimately, a lot of people don't understand this. The more dollars you drive to the bottom line, the more they are safe in their job, because you are going to overcome a lot of bad situations are going to come your way, and they are going to come your way, folks. If you are in business, you are going to have things that's going to happen in your business that you just can't predict it. There's no prediction.
Yeah. I think that's one of the most important things we've said so far is that problems are going to arise during your business. You're going to be the best problem solver on the planet. And if you're not, you probably aren't going to make it anyways. But, that's the best thing you said is the problems are going to happen. So if you're not stacking away some of your cash or have the ability to get cash if you need it, then you're already screwing up from Jump Street, because you need that cash for when the problems come. And I promise you they are going to come.
Every month, as a new entrepreneur, you'll see some big expense hit your books. And you're like, we're not going to have that month. That the next month. It could be a transmission in a truck. It could be a wreck. It could be whatever.
An engine like I'm dealing with right at this second.
We run Fords and we're blowing engines like crazy. It's a factory default, right? But it's a fact. It's impacting a lot of things. But my point is don't be naive and think that you're not going to have the things that are going to pop up. If you are running your projections, put I don't fucking know category on there and add 10% of your total gross income. That might not be enough if you're new. You might need to add 2% or 5% or 20%. I don't know what you're doing and how experienced you are and how much research you put into this, but you're going to have I don't know category. Mm-hmm. And I promise you there will be $1 in it every month if you're true with yourself.
Yep. And you've been keen on that since we very first started. It's like scratching my head at the very beginning going, what's he talking about? Putting a little variance in there he goes, I don't know. What'd you call it?
I don't fucking know.
I don't fucking know fund is what he called it.
And I put that on my bank projections.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's a real thing. And maybe they don't call it that, but we call it I don't
fucking know. And I put it on there and bankers laugh at it and they're like, what is this? And this, I don't know. You know what I mean?
It's whenever problems happen, this is the bucket it falls into, because problems are going to happen type situation.
And bankers and people that invest in you and people, your team, they like real people. If you are going into a banking situation trying to get trying to get money to build a business, to create cash flow yourself, and to live this better life that you think is going to be there, be real with yourself. Do not put some projections in place that are unrealistic and never will be met, right? Put realistic expectations for yourself, and that will help you understanding your spending habits. Like, don't go in there and say, I'm going to do $10 million year one, and you've never done the business before. More than likely, it's just not going to happen. There's a lot of YouTubers, and a lot of TikTokers, and a lot of Instagram people that have all these fake cars and all this stuff. We see it all the time. And then you hear like 3 or 4 years later, they're broke, or they're going to jail, or whatever it may be. Don't put pressure on yourself that's not needed. I see it too many times. Yeah. Understand, wealth takes time and a lot of execution. It's not done overnight. You're not going to be an expert at this overnight. So if you are putting projections in place and you are building a cash flow statement for your bank to go get more money, don't be afraid to go in there and pressure test it. That's what I always do. Like, okay, so many times I've seen financial projections that I about invested in, and it shows all this net profit. Folks, if it's usually too good to be true, it's too good to be true. There's no bullshit here. You don't lie to yourself. I always poke holes through it and say, well, what happens if this? And they don't have all these things in there, right? And that's just going to go tink, tink, tink down to the bottom line. And eventually, they haven't thought about enough of these things. And when you redo their projections and their cash flow reports, guess what?
Negative.
They're not making any money, right? And then I don't invest in it. So cash flow is everything. It's so important that you pay attention to it. It's so important you don't lie to yourself. It's so important from this month and last month, if you're not projecting some things that are coming your way, what do you have coming in? Let's test Eric. What do you have coming in February?
I have a turnaround coming in.
What else you got coming in that's going to impact your cash flow?
I got what I have coming in that's going to impact my cash flow. A lot of extra labor.
Labor, because he's gearing up for turnaround. What do you have in January?
Well, that's going to impact labor. I got a lot of extra material, but it's going to take more toilet paper and more, scent disc and what have you.
Exactly. What do you have in January that's going to impact your cash flow?
I got 5 payroll period month.
So when we were looking at, he revenued X, but he has 1 extra payroll, right?
Yeah. So if you're only making, say my payroll was $5,000, let's say my payroll is $5,000 a month, right? Which is not, but say it's $5,000 a month on a normal month where there's 4 payrolls. Well, now there's 1 extra. It's not going to be 5,000 anymore. It's going to be, 6,500 or whatever right? And you got to be able to understand that and make the adjustments ahead of time. So it's a very good point, and it's something that, I'm living right now. So it's not easy. We look at it. You got to stay ahead of it. You got to have your data, and you got to remember that cash flow is king, and you got to protect it, save it, keep your expenses down, and let's make some money together. How about it?
And nobody's going to protect your cash flow more than the owner or your executive team, right? Most people don't even understand cash flow. So don't be naive and think about, I hired this guy or I hired this guy. Do your research. Understand what it is. It's probably the most important thing in the business besides the product and service you're offering to create any cash, right? So there's a lot of tools and resources. There's a lot of YouTube videos besides this one that goes a lot more in depth to calculate it, to understand it, there's a lot of books out there. Don't be fucking lazy. I get tired of hearing all these comments and seeing and talking to people and, I don't know. I just don't know how to do that. What are you talking about? There's YouTube. There's people.
The resources are there.
Elon said it best. You don't need to go to college. There's enough knowledge and data online where you can teach yourself pretty much anything.
I don't disagree.
It's not going to be easy. You might have to be humble and realize that you don't know everything, right? But don't be lazy. You can understand this, and you have to understand this if you're going to be in business, because if you don't, you won't have one.
I love it.
So
I hope you're paying attention.
If you're not subscribed, please subscribe and like our page. Share it.
And share it to your other friends.
Give some comments.
Are losing cash flow every month too while you're at it.
Hey, and if you have a business, and it's making an exorbitant amount of cash flow, let us hear about it. I'd love to hear positive stories. Too many times, most businesses just don't succeed. They're not success stories, unfortunately. They're stressful. People don't make it. Partnerships don't work out. It causes divorces, heart attacks, anxiety, depression. People don't ever talk about that stuff. That might be a good episode coming in the future.
I like it.
But focus on your cash flow, be positive, make money, and let's go.